Okay, I promise you there's not going to be a lot of math on this, but just to begin with, some 10 to the 10th power years ago, that's a 1 followed by 100 zeros, the Big Bang happened. And the cosmos consisted completely of 3 elements. There was hydrogen, there was helium, and a little bit of lithium. And some of those formed together and made stars. And those stars burned for billions upon billions of years until they cooled and then collapsed and formed carbon. And some of that carbon ended up in our corner of the universe, where it formed Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. And they created the Patriots dynasty. And then after a few years, that turned into some Patriots podcasts. There are many Patriots podcasts out there, and I promise you that Do Your Pod is another one. And I'm going to be joined every week by my gentleman's gentleman, my producer, Nick Fasoli. Nick,
hey,
welcome aboard, man.
Hey, Jerry. Looking forward to this podcast. It's going to be a great football season, going to be a great 2021-2022 Patriot season.
And what have you been doing for Barstool prior to landing this gig, this plum gig that everybody in the world wants?
Truly blessed to be here. I mean, this was my dream ever since I was 12 years old. But I was a producer, and I was a producer at Merrimack College. I was a producer at iRacing and NASCAR. I produced for 6 months before COVID hit, actually, with NBC Sports, and I worked alongside some of the guests we may be having up in the future.
And now you've finally made it.
That's
like
right.
All that tuition that your parents spent, and maybe bail money.
No, not that type of crazy. Not that.
So, but you are a masshole, and I don't know
sir.
how much we're gonna cuss on this, but masshole is in the Oxford English Dictionary, so we can use that term freely. But so you're a mass guy from Cape Cod, right?
Yes, sir.
And how old are you?
I am 21 years old. So I grew up in the Tom Brady era.
God. No, wait. So did they win a Super Bowl before you were born?
I was actually almost 1 year old, almost 2 when they won the first one with Brady.
I can't even process this. Like you just
I was
broke
born
my brain.
into the Super Bowl era.
Dude, I was 22 by the time I saw them win a playoff game. I kid you not. Like they had a few good teams, but anytime they made the playoff, terrible things would happen. When I was 13, they lost the game at the Raiders. That was the roughing the passer game. Look it up. Yep. It's in the book, From Darkness to Dynasty by Jerry Thornton. A laugh on every page. They lost the game due to the worst officiating in the history of the NFL. And if I was Bruce Wayne, that game was my parents being killed in an alley. It has turned me into the dark, brooding vigilante of the night that you know. And yep. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out our cultural context here, because you've grown up during an era of unprecedented success, not just with this franchise, but in all of football, if not all of American sport, when you really think about it, right?
Yeah, I grew up in the time of the dynasty. I grew up in the winningness of New England, if you want to say the Red Sox, everything, the Bruins. I grew up in the best sports decade or decades of, I think, any sports history. And that's all because we're from Boston, both of us, and we do our jobs. And this is what this podcast is about, doing your job.
And do you ever feel like you I don't know, entitled, like, you know what I mean? Like a kid who grew up rich or whatever. Cause I used to worry about this. I'm not kidding you. That it's what I call the Yankee fanification of Patriots fans. Now, I went to Teddy Bruschi's first game back after his stroke. So that would be 2008. And it was Sunday night game, big emotional night. And my brother and I were up in the stands. We're making noise because it was like Buffalo had the ball 3rd and long. And I swear to God, this is when I said, we've lost our way. Our moral compass is like broken. A lady in front of us turned around and she shushed us. I'm not kidding. Like we were yelling in a library.
Yeah.
And we weren't swearing. We weren't being abusive. We were just making defensive noise. And I said, I don't think Pats fans can handle all this success. And weirdly, ironically, I think that what saved us, what kept us it wasn't 2008. It must have been 2005 because it was after he made the Pro Bowl. But anyway, you know, and so yeah, because his blood didn't flow on the long flight back from Honolulu. Be that as it may, I think what saved us was the fake scandals. Like not long thereafter, you had you had Spygate, which was a minor parking infraction, and they turned it into a capital crime. And then they, you know, the league was changing rules to try and stop them. And then I think by the time Deflategate came along, Pats fans were the most galvanized, engaged, angry, paranoid in a good way. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't against you. And internet savvy fan base in all the world. And so I think in a weird way, it's kept a guy like you from just kind of growing up in this, you know, and from just getting complacent is the word.
Exactly. And we're the fans who aren't soft, and we're the fans who aren't afraid to speak our mind and stuff like that. And I think it really genuinely grows from people, especially like you and like Dave Portnoy, Alprez, who we grew up watching. I mean, reading your blogs, watching you guys do your stuff every time there was a Patriots outrage or anything like that. And that's just that's the heart of New England. Like, that's exactly what we want. We're not every day, oh, damn, they lost, on to next week. No, we're on to Cincinnati, and we're back. You know?
Exactly. And the more hatred this franchise faces, the more we circle the wagons, right? The more,
exactly.
I mean, the 2 years I was gone from Barstool, because I was full-time at EEI, was the time of Deflategate. And I was using defend the wall as a metaphor. At the same time, Barstool was selling t-shirts with that. And I think it just, we came at it organically from the same point of view. It just arrived at the same Game of Thrones, you know, kind of mindset or whatever. And it was great. And if I have one regret in my life, it's that I wasn't there when the Brady guys got arrested.
The Brady boys, the 4 boys.
Yeah, because I would have. It would have been the Brady 5. I would have been there for sure. And you can tell from my delicate bone structure, I wouldn't last a minute in a Manhattan lockup. You know, I would have been traded for a pack of smokes, and I would have done it gladly for Brady. So how are you handling the whole post Brady era? Have you been, and I will tell you this, we're going to get into this with Tommy Curran, who was as close to the whole situation with Brady leaving as literally anybody in Boston media. But have you recovered? Was it a tough loss for you, since you've never known a world without him as the Pats quarterback?
Yeah, it was definitely hard at first. I mean, you come in and growing up almost 21 years, he left right before my 21st birthday, but just winning success, Tom Brady, that's what you know, number 12. And then you lose Brady, and we went through the whole 3-month Brady watch. And then you're thinking, okay, well, thank God it's finally over, but it sucks he's gone. I mean, that was my hero in a sense. You look up to as a sports fan, you look up to your guys you've watched growing up. He's been my quarterback since I was born, essentially. And I grew up that entire era. And then the knife in the back was really the Gronk trade. And the Gronk trade was, I thought, out of the blue, because we all thought Gronk was done. And he literally just put New England in a box and corner trapped us. And he did exactly what he needed to do. And it sucked. That one was a slap in the face. But I feel like everything's genuinely kind of over in New England now, like the old essence of New England after the whole, after Julian retired. And now I feel like there's a new era coming in New England, and I'm very excited for this ship to sail.
Oh, yeah, I'm beyond thrilled about, full disclosure with Mac Jones. And I'm not one, if you know me, I'm pretty humble, and I'm not one to spike the football when I'm right about a thing. And I hardly ever talk about it. And I'm sorry to do it right now, other than just organically in the moment. I will say I called it. I predicted that they would draft Mac Jones. I've
you wrote about
talking
it,
about it nonstop, reminding everyone that I was right. And I said this in like late March. I want to say like March 24th or 25th. I said he's the perfect Patriot. I think his existence, and I said at the time, is a referendum on how you feel about the quarterback position in today's NFL. That if you think that it has to be a freakishly athletic, mobile guy like Patrick Mahomes, like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, you can go on and on. Okay, then Mac Jones is not the guy for you. But if you still think that, while it's great to be able to, Josh Allen leave the pocket and make a throw on the run and, plays outside of structure and whatever, that's fine. I still think that there's a role for a traditional drop back passer. And I will use as a recent example, the guy that we've been talking about here, Tom Brady, who at the age of 43
still
defeated Mahomes. And before that, defeated Aaron Rodgers, who's a mobile quarterback, and defeated Drew Brees, who, while he was standing in retirement's on deck circle, still was always known as a rolling outside the pocket passer. And I think, yes, you can still win in this league by just having a sense of the pocket and being able to move and, anticipate throws. And basically, I guess what I'm saying is the number one skill, the number one body part you need to be a Patriots quarterback is between your ear holes. You still have to have an accurate arm and so on, but it's just about being smart. And clearly, by the fact that he went from drafted to mini camp to the starting job in the span of a few months, tells us that we should feel good about him, right?
Yeah, I feel extremely confident with Mac, and I'm very excited. I mean, I've told you this before. When we saw Josh and Belichick both go down for Mac's pro day, and supposedly Mac had the worst pro day of all the QBs in the draft, but he was fantastic, and he was on everyone's top 5 board before the pro day even began. And then you see both of those guys down there. Usually it's either Josh, usually Bill, or maybe Josh all the time going scouting. But both of them, and they were standing next to Saban, and I was like, there's something up here. Like, I knew it then that he was going to be a Patriot. And coming into the draft, it was a crazy night. And then as soon as we get past the 10th pick, it was locked in. Everyone knew.
And it's funny you mention that too, that the pro day workout, because at that same workout were John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. And if I recall, they didn't ever talk to Jones. I barely talked to Saban. And, maybe it was just one of those things like, I've been doing stand-up since before you were born. And if you have a real garbage set, or let me put it this way, if another comic has a really garbage set, you're really reluctant to talk to him. If someone kills it, hey, wow, great job. Wow, look at that. They're going to build a statue of you. And if somebody does, eats it on stage, you just kind of like leave them alone. And maybe that's what happened. Like Jones looked so bad that they didn't really want to talk to him. We're just going to we're here to look at the receivers and some defensive linemen or whatever. And maybe Jones tanked it but at that point they had already moved up to number 3, and the word was out there. What's his name? Chris Sims. Who, is supposedly tight with Shanahan, was telling everyone, they moved up to get Mac Jones because he's NFL ready or whatever. What do you think of this here? And I am not making it up. This is being espoused all the time on Boston Sports Radio that that they didn't want Jones. As a matter of fact, former disgraced Patriots GM Upton Bell from like the 70s, who was just a colossal embarrassment. He tweeted this out just yesterday. He said, if they wanted Jones, they would have moved up to get him. So that's the logic, that they didn't really want him. And the proof is they didn't trade up to get him. They stayed at 15 and he came to them.
I don't know if I 100% believe that, because
you shouldn't, because it's nonsense.
Yeah, it's nonsense. I mean, you look at everything Bill's ever done in the draft. He's never moved up to take a player. Yeah, we got lucky with the 15th pick, but it's because we finished short 3 games the last season before. I mean, thanks
to be fair,
you can thank that to Cam.
Yeah, not to interrupt your flow, but he has made some moves up in the first round of the draft. But
never for a quarterback,
right? Small moves, never from 15 to say 11, which would cost you a couple of future first rounders. He's made minor tweaks, but he sat at 21 and got Vince Wilfork, who was
Yeah.
supposed to go in the top 10.
Mhm.
He went back 2 spots to take Gerard Mayo. Am I supposed to believe that they didn't want those guys? Like, it's insane. That's like saying,
Yeah.
well, the Chicago Bulls, didn't really want
Juan
Michael
Jordan.
Jordan.
Yeah.
If they did, they would have moved up and got him at number 1. Like, but that's the kind of crap that you deal with as a Pats fan. Like, you
Oh,
can't just, hey, smart move by him. He stayed where he was and got the guy that he personally scouted that Josh McDaniels loved. No, it has to be wrong. It has to be terrible.
I mean, that's just all the New England guys talking from the truck, as they say on all the other radio shows, Boston sports media. But what can you do? This podcast won't be all the guys talking from the truck. We'll be hearing a lot of knowledge about Patriots from highly renowned people around the area. And who do you think you're going to be bringing on, Jerry? I want to ask you.
I got a decent relationship with a lot of the media types in town, and in spite of the fact that I like to belittle them, work with, I mean, I like to work with a lot of them, have a decent relationship, and gonna aim high. I mentioned comedy. I'd love to have some comics on at some point. Anyone who cares about the Pats as much as we do, and let's get celebrities. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Let's not stop until we've gotten the Boston has ruled the 21st century. Again, I mentioned masshole making it the Oxford English Dictionary. You can't if you want to get an Oscar now, you have to play somebody from Boston. That's the only way to please the Academy, is to play some jagoff from Manchester by the Sea or Southie or whatever. Love to get any of them. Like I said, mention comics. Belichick, if he's not too busy, I think he can give us a couple of hours of his time. And I think you and I have some schemes and some blitz packages we'd like to share with him. I've been waiting my chance. I actually got to interview him a lot at EEI, and I may once in a while just drop that in there just to kind of lord it over people about what a big deal I am and what a close personal friend of mine he is. So there's a lot of new faces in town I want to talk to. Want to ask Tommy Curran about. This free agent period was bonkers. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. And the fact that they signed all these guys that I'd said, I put together a list of guys I wanted to see them go after. Mm-hmm. And Belichick just started checking all these boxes to the point where he, right out of the gate, Jonnu Smith.
Day one was.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember thinking, okay, well, Hunter Henry's generally regarded as the number 1 tight end on the market. Well, they got the number 2. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And add all these other guys, Jalen Mills as a do it all, 5-position defensive back. Then Aguilar, then Kendrick Bourne, and then Hunter Henry the next day.
It was electric. I was sitting on the couch with my roommates, and day one was just like, what is going on? It was probably 11:45 lunchtime, and everything starts rolling. And we were like, what? Like, 20 years, never seen Bill do that. Never. It was like there was a new GM in the office, like brand new guy in the business, because Bill's never done that. And that's never been the Patriot way.
Like every 10 years, you'd get a Roosevelt Colvin.
Yeah.
And then, a Stephon Gilmore or whatever. But then you mostly understood that he was going to be shopping from the remainder bin.
Yep.
And he just completely flipped the script in a way that, all right, Matt Judon was franchised last year.
Unbelievable. To franchise a guy like that, I'm so glad we picked up Matt Judon. And he's going to be unbelievable.
And has stood out in camp and seems to be that guy with like a crazy good attitude. Devin McCourty's talked about how, first day of practice, all the skill guys are running. We turn around and here's this linebacker running with us and not just going through the motions. And I will tell you this, and I want to get your thoughts on who you think the best free agent's going to be. Mm-hmm. I went to the first practice of OTAs, and the stadium employee stops me and says, I got to tell you something. These guys that they've signed love it here. like for real. Even one of them who like, sort of seemed like he had big timed this person and then came back later and said, look, I have to apologize to you for not talking to you, but I was on a phone call and I couldn't, and this person's like, you don't have to you apologize to me. He says, no, I don't want to be rude. But while I have it, I got to tell you, I freaking love it here. I loved where I was before, but the whole atmosphere here is great. And that was pretty much all the way down the line from the guys that they brought in, that they were just like, for all the whole narrative going into free agency was nobody wants to play here anymore because the only draw is now down in Tampa Bay. So they'll all go take the, minimum to go down there. Why would anyone want to come play for Coach McNoFun up here? And nope, this just gave total lie to that. People who are uber serious about winning football games still want to come here because of the guy who's running the show.
Absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't you want to play for, I'm going to say, the best coach in NFL history? And these guys are getting handed contracts of 60 million, 70 million each. And this is the first time we've ever seen Bill pay that much. I mean, we dropped $165 million in free agency. When was that ever? In 2 days, we dropped that much. We've never done that. And
it's just they saw an anomaly in the off season. They had tons of cap space to spend in a league where like at least half the teams had to cut payroll.
Oh God, yeah. That's why I mean, look at the Ravens. I mean, we took Judon from them, but look at their roster. They lost a ton in free agency. I mean,
couldn't happen to a nicer franchise, by the way.
I know.
With all due respect to our Barstool Ravens fans, like it just that's been the best rivalry of the past 20 years, and I don't think anything even comes close. And so not enough. It's not enough that I succeed; others must also fail. And if the Patriots gain is the Ravens loss, then so much the better. Yeah. So power rank them briefly, the new guys that they've brought in.
Oof, I mean, to me, I'm most excited about all the defensive players. And you asked me before who I'm most excited for, and obviously all the new guys who haven't been in New England. But the one I'm most excited to have back, I'm excited for Kyle Van Noy.
Yep, great choice.
This defense is going to be solid again, and we are going to be. I think we're going to be devastating on the defensive side, and we're going to win a ton of games because of our devastating defense. And that's going to allow Mac Jones to do what he did. It's going to be like Alabama all over again.
Yeah, I mean, Van Noy is a great choice because, again, a guy who came in and, was bust is too strong a word, but, he didn't really justify his draft spot when he was with Detroit. He comes to New England and he's just that guy who fits what they're doing perfectly. And then cashes in to go play for Brian Flores in Miami, and I'm still gobsmacked that after 1 year and paying him a ton. I think he got like 30 million or something.
He did. He got like 34, I think. And they just let him go with the wind.
They just jettisoned the pod on this guy who, as the guy you would think has the right attitude. He's a charismatic dude. He knows what Flores is doing down there. I will never be able to process why they let him go, but he comes back to New England with a chip on his shoulder, the size of a banquet table, and
he's ready to roll again.
Thrilled to get him. Yep. I think Judon is their best signing. I think
Trent
on
Brown.
the offensive side. Trent Brown. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great point. They lost the guy that we knew they were going to lose. They weren't going to franchise Joe Thuney again.
Nope.
And he's, one of the best guards they've had. Certainly the second best guard of the championship era behind only Logan Mankins. And so he leaves. You add Brown, which now take Michael Onwenu, who was I say the best 6th round pick they've ever had out of Michigan.
I don't disagree.
Did they ever draft another one? No.
Not for Michigan, but 6th round pick.
Yeah. They move him over to his more natural position of guard to fill in for Onwenu, and now you got Brown there. So they actually lost their best offensive lineman and then upgraded the offensive line. Nationally, they're considered at least a top 3 offensive line in the league.
I don't disagree.
Adding a crazy element to the run game, and we haven't really got into the rookies other than Jones, but Ramondre Stevenson. I just, all right, they draft this guy. Right, he's 245 pounds. We all think, okay, look, Garrett Blunt. He's blunt, but I expected him to be like a redshirt freshman, like they did with Damian Harris. And he ends up making the 53 man because he's been unstoppable. Yes, preseason, I get it, but he ran a 91-yard end around against Washington in the first game, and was running away from corners and safeties at 245.
But he's also, I think, faster, and he's had 5 touchdowns in the preseason.
Yeah.
It's
insane.
unbelievable.
And every kind of run too, like bowling over people. He ran, I can't remember like exactly what the play was, but he had a touchdown run. He bowled through 3 tacklers that was so much like what LeGarrette Blount used to do that they added a loss to the 2014 Colts record because nobody ever owned a team
bullied that
the way Blount used to just
he was amazing.
Them. And also, they've had this kid returning kicks, at least in practice. I'll be curious to see if they do that in a game because they did that with Blunt, and it was just nobody else like him in the league grabbing a ball at the goal line. So I'm all about seeing what that kid can do behind this offensive line, knowing that he's going to be, their number 2 option behind Damian Harris, who established himself as one of the best backs in the league. So that's what Mac Jones is walking into, like a 2 tight end offense, and still James White. And I think who was a surprise. I thought he was.
I thought he was gone. Yep.
It seemed for all the world like he was going to go down to Miami. He had that family tragedy last year that you could see where he would want to go back to home, and one of the most appreciated Patriots of the dynasty era. So you get the gift of another year with him. And I think JJ Taylor is like his understudy. The guy who's going to be probably their 5th option, or a guy who, comes into the spread offense or whatever, but White is still, the guy he's going to be learning on behind. And then you throw in 2 new receivers into a 2 tight end offense. They don't have to go that deep. And by the way, Jacoby Myers was their number 1 receiver last year and is better now than he was. And he's on that career path like Edelman was, like Wes Welker was, like Troy Brown was, a guy who establishes himself as an undervalued, either a late pick or an undrafted guy, and, hangs on to the roster through special teams and picking his spots, and then emerges as this slot weapon, and which he is. Mark my words, between the numbers on the field and the top level of the defense and behind the linebackers right there, that's where he's going to thrive.
Yep. I think there's going to be a lot more, and people are saying this is Mac Jones' struggle, but I think they've been working all summer, and I think he's going to succeed highly in the 10 to 15 yard in and outs across the middle. I think they're going to tear up defenses because, we're either going to go heavy on the set and we're going to run double tight end, because Hunter Henry is now playing on Sunday for the first time. You could see the 2009-2010 Patriots offense with Gronk and Hernandez, and we could see that on Sunday again. And we could see just total dominance in the run game and the passing game, because teams won't be able to cover us again. And that's what really slacked, I think. And that's where I think Brady made up for it. And I'd say probably 2014 on. But he made up for that when we struggled in the wide receiver core, when we had Julian, when we had Gronk from time to time because he was injured. But other than that, we didn't really have many options. And now I think we're back to that.
Yeah, you know what? We're not getting ahead of ourselves, are we?
No, I don't think so.
we're so crazy optimistic, which is kind of my default setting anyway. But there's no way I was feeling this way this time last year. You were hopeful, and they had a good couple of weeks to start off the season, and then Newton got COVID, and they had a tough loss or 2 in there, and the Seattle game especially, where they couldn't punch it in from first and goal. but this just has such a different feel to it. It's not, like it's hope, but it's justified hope.
Yeah.
Right?
It might be because the world's coming back again, and maybe because we're getting back to normal post COVID and everything like that. But it's like, it just feels like mid 2000s New England in a way, in an essence to me. Like, I haven't even been back to Boston yet, but just from this vibe of the team, I feel like everyone's excited to play football again.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And speaking of things I'm optimistic about, this is obviously the first step in this little vanity project that we're working on here, but I'm feeling optimistic about me and you. Like,
absolutely.
You know what this does? This checks a box for me. I've always wanted to be part of a duo of opposite mismatched guys who hey, they can't possibly work together, yet somehow it clicks. Like,
it works.
Yeah, like we should have a name like Old Balls and Fasoli or something.
Old Balls.
Okay, but here's the twist. I'm the you're the straight-laced guy who does everything by the book, and I'm the wild card who thinks that you can't always go by regulations, and we'll always solve crimes by first walking into a strip joint and asking the dancers questions because they know everything. Maybe rough up a criminal informant once in a while to get to the truth, but goddamn, we always crack the case.
That's right.
Okay, all right. And I've also wanted to always fly my car off an off ramp and through a billboard and then keep driving. But I probably not going to do that on this show. But the mismatched duo who make it all click, that's what I think we're going to be on this. So
absolutely.
With that, let's set up this interview. It's going to be with Tommy Curran, NBC Sports Boston, guy
Very
that
excited.
I used to work with on the Pats pre and post game show, and you've worked with too over there, and just a media giant. He hosts Quick Slants and his own podcast, and nationally known guy, and just had a great talk with him, and really appreciate
Heart of New England media.
Yeah. Oh, he's a giant in the business. I appreciate him helping us kick this thing off. So, hey, kick off. There you go. See, the first clumsy sports radio guy pun. Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway, so appreciate it. This is going to be Do Your Pod. When are we going to be dropping this every week?
We are dropping every Wednesdays at noon.
Fantastic. Okay. So thanks. And here now is Tommy Curran. Tommy Curran, thanks for joining us on this maiden voyage of our little rocket ship to the moon. You were the best choice for us to have, mostly for you've been around the scene. You've always been frank. You were the first guy in the legitimate, I'll call it Patriots media to approach me and talk to me like somebody who actually knew what he was doing back in Barstool's infancy. And, you've always been a blast. So thanks for coming aboard.
I'm really, really flattered that you would have me on first. I mean, there's a lot of great people on our beat, obviously, that, who do great work. So I appreciate it, Jerry, and appreciate your vantage point and your take on things all the way through. Very underrated, Jerry is on the X's and the O's, which I always look forward to the knee-jerk reactions because it's very, very well done. And I learned something virtually every week. And then sometimes I go, that's not right. That's wrong. That's not right.
Oh, believe me, I'm burping the alphabet. Now, I always just think if anybody associated with the team, anyone in the meeting room read what I wrote or think, they're probably laughing their asses off.
I will say
this guy doesn't know his X's from his O's.
But 90% of the time, what we as the media and fans perceive is exactly what the players and coaches are thinking. 90% of the time, they have the same questions about decisions, about personnel, about situational stuff, opinions about other players. They don't have a Rosetta Stone or whatever that they operate off of that we can't read. We're all seeing the same stuff.
Sure. Okay. And to full disclosure, you're here because Ernie Adams hasn't returned our calls. So
he might see different stuff.
Oh, if he comes on, we'll bounce in this and delete him. I'm just going to tell you right now. And Belichick too, but I'm not holding my breath. And I should know this, but just by way of background, how long have you been on the Patriots beat? Because I feel like you just kind of emerged one day, like like fully formed, like a Greek god, like
97. I was at the Metro West Daily News. I had just come from the Waltham News Tribune, and I got to cover the Patriots beginning in 1997. So I was covering the Patriots, but also covering, Westboro girls lacrosse and Franklin soccer and, Bellingham track. But I would every Wednesday go down there and get all my story stuff. And then on Sunday, cover the game. And sometimes I go down there on Fridays. And so that was when I started.
Okay. So fair to say that you've never seen an off season even remotely like this. I just feel like everything has transpired exactly according to their design, to quote the Emperor from Star Wars, which I'm going to do a lot of. I'm going to warn everybody right now.
Yeah.
But I just, from the beginning, from free agency, Belichick went in there like supermarket sweeps and filled his carriage. And then the draft just seemed to fall right in their lap. And I can't remember a time that's anything remotely as wild as the last 6 months have been.
No. And I think that the main reason would be because they went 7-9, which is to most teams 1-15. For them to go 7-9 and Belichick to ascribe the reason as being, look, we're getting right. When he talked to Charlie Weiss last November, and he said, how can we play so many young players? And he said, look, this is our situation. We have big cap troubles. We're getting right with the cap. And then he said a couple of days later, look, we have cap issues. Talking on EEI, said, look, paying Cam Newton $1 million. I mean, we're screwed. So you could tell at that point, he's like, okay, we're just going to stay in. We're going to eat in for this year. And then we're going to dine out next year when we have money again. So I knew that they were, and we all did, that they were bracing for a massive run in the off season. But the way you say that it fell together is fascinating, because they got all the guys they wanted, but they didn't have the quarterback. They had Cam, and I think that they, almost positive when you look back at it, they signed Cam so that they could say to Hunter Henry and Nelson Aguilar and everybody else, see, we have a quarterback. Don't worry. Sign here. We have a quarterback. But their plan wasn't done until they got Mac Jones at 15.
Okay. So are you buying into the theory that, it's a molten lava take that's been fueling talk radio basically for all summer, that this is all just a reaction to the fact that he's butthurt that Brady won without him? Or are you buying into what I think the logical thing is? It was a weird year. The cap went down. They had a ridiculous amount of cap space. And so they went ahead and did the responsible thing, which is to go spend to the cap and build a winner.
If Tom Brady went 4-12 and had 20 touchdowns and 23 picks in Tampa, they would have done exactly the same stuff they did this offseason. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. And I get it's ridiculous to think that this guy, after, he's been in the league since 1975 when he was going to get coffee for Ted Marcher-Broad or whatever, would all of a sudden change and have an emotional reaction to the fact that his football marriage broke up, and would do something he otherwise would not have done.
I think there's a dynamic around the team, certainly, whether it's fed by the media or fans or ownership or coaching staff urgency, that is more pronounced because of what Brady did. I don't think that Robert Kraft is on a conference call and Bill Belichick isn't in March of 2021. And Belichick stays bunkered the entire offseason. And Kraft says, we have to figure out the quarterback position and we have to do a better job drafting because we can't buy teams. I think that probably has some roots in what Brady did, but I don't think that the actual acts of signing these players has anything to do with it. Belichick's going to make the best team that he can regardless. I just think that's if the marriage is on the rocks and you split up, that was going to happen anyway, and you were going to go about your business regardless of whether your wife's somebody new within 2 weeks or not.
Right. And is living a fantastic life.
That's the other part.
Way happier.
Yeah.
Because I've said this before, I'll say it now, and I want to get a little bit into the Brady thing before we talk about this team. But I don't care how amicable a split is. If you're a human being, there's a part of you that wants the person who left you to go to pot. I wanted to see him on some level just fall apart without us, without me personally. Like that, he would gain a bunch of weight and stop showering and just wear a bathrobe all day. And so instead, Brady's life is he's an Instagram influencer. He's on a yacht in the Caribbean, and he and his new love are making hard hands around the sunset and just way happier. And I got to ask you about this because, you're someone who had a certain relationship with Brady. I'm not telling tales out of school. You and I discussed this on WEEI once. So you got treatment down at TB12 Fitness, and you swore by it, and that's great. Do you ultimately think that pliability war was what caused the breakup, or did Brady just need a change?
No. It predated that. It had been building. That was a symptom of a greater ill. And it's the greater ill that exists when you work someplace and you go from a job that you had at 20, the one you're still doing at 40, and the same rules apply. And you're like, but I've been here for 16 years and I'm playing for less money than usual. And I still do an unbelievable job and I still have to get all this bullshit. And I think that is the wearing of it. And someone said to me in right after the Atlanta Super Bowl, now everything changes. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, now he's got 5. Nobody else has 5. He's got 5. And now we're going to start to do things our way a little bit. So I wonder what that means. Well, what it meant was there would be a TB12 book. There would be Tom versus Time. There would be, and this is all going into 2017. And there wouldn't be a lot of, hey, Bill, is it okay if I do this? This became, if you look back at Brady's mindset then, he was very concerned about his post-football life. In 2014, I know that 2015, when Deflategate was going on, he eventually said to his dad, will you please stop talking about Roger Goodell and the NFL and demonizing them? Because I don't want to get blackballed around the league. If I ever have to go someplace else and I can't get a job because of the things you said. He was always concerned about his football mortality. And he was concerned in 2017 about growing his football brand aside from just being the Patriots quarterback. So he embarked on that. And that became, a point of contention, especially when Gronk, coming back from his back surgery from 2016, came and said, I'm full on with doing TB12 stuff. I'm not squatting anymore. I'm doing bands, etc. And that's how that came into play, Jerry's. And I'm going on, but it's important if people are curious about it, because that's when Gronk said, I'm not doing squats. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And that became a point of contention because Belichick's like, well, I can't have guys blocking who don't do squats, who have no lower body strength. And then when Gronk had a poor camp, Belichick at times would kind of mock him for not doing the work that he was being asked to do in the weight room. That made Gronk, at that time, Brady's little brother, hurt. So Brady got more agitated. Next thing you knew, there was Belichick saying, you know what? This has gone a little too far with the TB12 stuff. How about this? How about everybody has to go up there to see him, and I don't want people going up there. And Brady said, I'm not going up there. If you want me to go up there, then I won't be at practice because I need to get my treatment. So they eventually said, okay, he can be down here. That's why you see in Tom versus Time, he was never in the locker room. He's up in the Brady suite. So that's where the contention came in. And that's when Brady started to say, you know what? What are we doing? Why is this getting so difficult for me? And Belichick's like, well, you're playing by different rules. I'll play by the rules I'm going to have. Then Garoppolo gets traded. And Brady says, okay, where's my contract? Am I staying here? I want to know what I'm doing with the rest of my life. No contract, just incentives. That's where it germinated from, Jerry.
Okay. All right. So
is that a good explanation? Did you know that mostly?
I mean, some of it has peaked above the water. You know what I mean? There was a good size iceberg that you gave us there that we hadn't seen, but the Garoppolo thing was always a part of that. We knew about the Gronk, and being called out in practice in front of everyone. And clearly, he was, emotionally wounded by that enough to just say, you know what, I'd rather just not play. I'd rather just wrestle once and then try to sell cannabis products and throw parties or whatever. And I think there's still a lingering resentment. As much as everyone loves Gronk and his personality and what he brought to the table, I think around New England, there's a lot of people just saying, so wait, he all of a sudden is healthy enough to go play for them and catch more touchdowns in the first half of the Super Bowl than our entire tight end depth chart did.
I think he was more injured by things and more unable to put it away than Brady was. You know, if you look at 17, you look at 18, you know, that whole motocross ridiculousness that he did before the 18.
Yeah,
season.
that was so tone deaf. Oh my God.
And then to kind of purposely drag his feet on announcing his retirement. The Patriots miss out on Jerry Cook. He announces his retirement. And then to come back when he knew the Patriots were in cap hell and force that trade. I mean, he Belichick with some of his vindictiveness, which was very much framed under, you know, it's Gronk being Gronk, but he did a good job getting back at Bill for what he perceived to be his mistreatment.
And intentionally.
And yeah, my understanding is there were a lot of those things that he did. He could have done differently, but he chose to do it the way he did.
Yeah.
Which,
well, sure. I mean, you mentioned Tom Brady Sr. calling out the league. I mean, nobody was more vocal than Gronk's camp, as they always called it. There was never a name attached, but they totally was resentful of the medical treatment he got, right? The surgeries that got botched, right? Didn't something get infected and come back?
Yeah,
and
his arm.
At some point that the doctor just put a zipper in so he could just keep accessing the same surgery over and over again. And I think that ultimately was what led to the departure. Is that?
Yeah, well, that, and then again, the bitterness over, okay, I've gone through all this bodily sacrifice. I'll never forget that 2015 game against Denver when they were 8-0 or 10-0, whatever they were. And he got hit in the knee in the snow and he started kind of flopping around like a salmon. Because I think that he thought, okay, this is it again. I'm screwed. And basically he missed a week. But I'm not making fun of him. I'm just saying he was that scared of the hits that were going to land him back in another 6 to 8 months of rehab over and over and over again. And he was beaten down by it.
Sure. Okay. Well, and it's going to be insane when the two of them come back in week 4.
Yes.
To the point where, I mean, I have people asking if I'm getting tickets. Not only am I not going, I'm going to barely be able to watch it at home. It's going to be an emotional Chernobyl for me as it is, and more power to the people who are going to spend $1,700 a whack to go see that. I wish I could detach myself enough from it to actually be there. Do you get at all? Did you actually get wrapped up at all in this?
Oh yeah, of course. Okay. I mean, I like to, Jerry, oftentimes think how lucky I am that I've had this front row seat and now I'm watching. Look, I think that the Patriots from 2000 to 2021 trumped the Yankees in many ways because they've been continuous. The Yankees went from, you know, the mid 20s to the late 30s off, and then again in the 50s. This is unstinting excellence that is the equivalent of what the Packers in the 60s and the Niners in the 80s did. So he's got Lombardi and Walsh, and both are in each pocket. Belichick has done it all on his own. So it's the greatest franchise in the history of organized professional sports in America, in my estimation, led by perhaps the greatest coach in any American sport. The most accomplished player in our most important sport has left, has won elsewhere, and now will return. I mean, this is Babe Ruth coming back to play against the Red Sox. There is no equivalent. You can't talk about Michael Jordan on the Wizards or Wilt on the friggin' Lakers playing against the Sixers or some crap. This is unmatched.
And the most anticipated regular season game, I'm going to say in New England sports history, possibly in the history of North American sports. Again, I can't think of anything that is equivalent because, yeah, the 20 years, obviously, and then him going to a team that had the franchise that has the worst record in the history of the NFL and winning a title with them, and not just winning a title, but surreal, like it in his home stadium, winning 3 games on the road and then playing the Super Bowl at home. It's just a continuation of this theory I'm working on, that when Bledsoe got hurt by Mo Lewis in 2001, that I fell and hit my head and I'm going to wake up soon. and it's going to be still like the third quarter of that game, and I'm
Oh,
still
yeah.
working at a courthouse, and this has all been like a Wizard of Oz like dream. And yeah, and I hope so. Like if I had a choice between taking the pill that keeps me in this simulation or the other pill, oh, I'd stay in this.
Yeah, no, it's same. I mean, why didn't I end up covering the Cardinals or the Browns or something else? I mean, it's just, and not only, you know, to realize that in my time, I've covered Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady, Cam Newton, and now the beginning of Mac Jones. We'll see what he turns into, but I've only covered 3 quarterbacks, and they're all, you know, unbelievably talented, really smart and introspective men. And they were just, their times here, obviously Brady's the most, were just decorated by more drama than you could shake a stick at. How's that?
Well, and bless you for bringing me back into the present day. I said we wouldn't get too lost in the weeds, and we went into British Open rough there for a while.
Of course.
But yeah, it's I can't talk enough about that stuff. So you were the guy who, when we were all looking at the palindrome war, Cam versus Mac, as you know, like a fight that was going to end up a split decision on the judges' cards, you know, you came out really strongly and said pretty much that Jones has won the job. Why would we look at what we've seen and think otherwise? Did you have inside info on that, or were you just saying like there's no reason not to give Jones the job?
Any of the conversations that I was having were confirmations, you know. Hey, I'm seeing this. Is this accurate? Yeah, it's pretty good. That Wednesday practice, that looked ridiculous to the layman's eyes. Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. It was more, Jerry, just following the track of covering the team and understanding how Belichick operates. So when so many people say, well, Bill said that Cam was a starter. He said that Cam was a starter. And at the end of that sentence, he said, and when Jarrett or Mac are ready to challenge, then we'll cross that bridge. That's not saying Cam's a starter. That's saying that there's a competition to me. Same thing happened at training camp. You know, when would you, who's the starter? Cam's a starter. Well, how are you going to decide ultimately? Well, it'll be production, it'll be competency, and it's going to be a hard decision. So we seized on the wrong things. When he said a decision, that said to me, the decision, that means there's a competition. And day in and day out, see, I said, Jerry, that he had to win by knockout. Mac did. And it turned out he didn't win by knockout, but he won kind of like Larry Holmes over Tex Cobb. He won every round fairly decisively, day after day. So that by the end of it, you had probably, I don't know, it's 20 practices, 21. And I would say Mac Jones clearly won probably 15, tied 3. It might have lost 2.
See, that's exactly how I saw it until that final preseason game against the Giants. And I just said, well, this is exactly what it looks like when you're the starting quarterback. Cam Newton came out, he played with the ones for a couple of series, had light work, and went to the bench. And then they rolled Jones out there to play with the seconds, and then really some true depth guys, some real roster bubble guys. And I said, okay, well, I guess I've been wrong. And then he was gone a couple of days later.
When you look at the workload, though, Cam had missed most of the week. And on Friday, he threw 4 balls in anger on Friday in a joint practice. Then he comes out and he takes 2 series and throws 5 balls. So regardless of when he went out there, I'm like, where's the work? He hasn't had the work all week, and now they're not giving him the work. And then the week before in Philadelphia, he still only had 2 series. In the first game, he took 12 snaps and threw and had 2 series. So the work just wasn't there. He threw the ball 21 times, and I know with 4-game preseasons, but Bledsoe and Brady in 2001 and 2002, they both threw it over 60 times. And I'm like, this guy needs the work, and they're not giving it to him. Why? So that was something else that kind of convinced me as well.
Yeah, I got to say, this has never happened before. Not in my experience.
No,
anyway.
we got to go
I
way
can't
back.
name another example where a guy was spent all of spring and all of summer with the ones, taking first team reps, and then not only didn't end up as the one, but got cut. like what?
But he took those reps, but Mac was splitting the reps with the ones, and he was out there
Right.
quite a bit with the ones. And then he had an entire practice with the ones on that Wednesday. And that's when I said it's over. You know, he goes 35 for 40 on a Wednesday practice. And if I'm the Patriots coaching staff, I'm walking in and go, what else does he have to do?
Right. And looked as good at the end of that practice. And it was what, 95, and
Heat index had to be
Oh.
110. It was like living in a rectum.
yeah, exactly. I at one point I said, well, maybe I'll take some shelter in the media tent. It was like the hot box from Cool Hand Luke. Like the one that they, if you don't return your spoon, that they make you spend a night in or whatever. And Jones looked like a guy who has been playing in Alabama for 4 years. Like the conditions just didn't phase him. He looked as good at the end as he had at any point. And that was against the Giants, against they're so that's as close to live competition as you got to face. And ultimately I came out of that saying he has to get the job. And then a few days later, against the Giants, Newton convinced me otherwise just by where they played him. But did you ever see him not making the roster?
In the fashion that it happened, and I only heard this reported by Greg Bedard, I don't know this firsthand, that no, I didn't think it would ever happen in the fashion that Bedard said, where they just said to him, we're releasing you. Thought it might be, Mac has the job. We appreciate everything you're doing. We want you to stay here. I didn't think that they would be released.
You believe, and this is just pure speculation, but it makes plausible sense anyway, that they said, look, we'd love to have you as a $3 million backup. And he just said, I'd prefer to go take my talents elsewhere.
But my understanding is that didn't happen. He was never given the option. It's just, we're going to move in a different direction. We're going to release you.
And why do you think that is? Because there's been a lot of just talk and pure speculation.
Then this will be pure speculation too. I guess you can call it informed speculation, but my speculation would be that it could have become too much of a distraction for a young player to look over his shoulder and know that after every 3 and out or pick or strip sack, the camera was going to find Cam on the sideline with the towel over his head, just standing there watching. And people say, well, how much longer will they go with the rookie? You have an MVP over there. It only would feed into the conversation and the speculation. Do they care about that media-wise? Not really. We've seen that. But do they care about that development-wise for that player? And do they care about what the role would be for Cam Newton? Yeah. Everybody matters. And if Cam can't embrace the role that he's given, if he believes he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks on the planet and should have a starting job, he's not going to embrace that. So what's the upside of courting that drama?
Yeah.
He's not that great a thrower, so it's not like he's going to come in and perhaps play better than Brian Hoyer as a thrower. I mean, there were plenty of times, Jerry, you must have felt the same way the end of last year. I mean, every time they had to come back because the deficit was too high, they benched him.
Yeah. Yeah. And seeing them take a knee at the end of halves was just beyond comprehension. I'm like, wait, they have the ball, they have timeouts, but they don't want to take the chance with him. And there's this natural reaction when you talk about Newton's play that people say, oh, well, you don't like him because he's a personality or you don't like his fashion sense. Like, no, I mean, you dealt with him more than I did. You never actually got to talk to him in person though, right? It was all.
I did. I actually asked him.
That was all
after
virtual.
The third practice. I'm like, hey, how come it's taking you so long to make decisions? And he gave a great answer. And in answering that, he said, sometimes you say, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, that can't be a condition in year 11.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, Jerry, I bet you'll agree with it. He was a frigging godsend to this team in 2020.
Absolutely.
He was the best thing that could have happened to them.
Right. The guy to replace the irreplaceable guy.
But also to run the ball. He had 12 friggin' touchdowns, 600 yards.
Right. Exactly. And a team first guy, really like galvanized them. You could see that they, even when things were going south, they never weren't playing with energy and, all the intangibles and all that BS. Tough, dropped in here on like June 30th or whatever with this whole different playbook and nomenclature he's never dealt with before, whatever. I liked everything about him. Best interview in Boston sports, I'd say, since maybe Pedro Martinez. I liked it all except when he was throwing a football. That's where I had issues, which is
it just wasn't going to get any better either.
Yeah, and it was kind of important. Like I've yet to ever get on a plane and say to the flight attendant, "So how's the pilot? Oh, he's a great guy. Oh, we love him. He has nicknames for everyone. Not the guy you want at takeoff and landing."
Right. He could use some work on that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It is what it is. Just make sure you're ready to get like this.
Yeah, but bingo. And that's what I was doing most of the time when the Pats were facing third and long. And yes, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, and everything needs to be viewed through the prism of this guy was making about as much as the long snapper.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know anyone that's really harsh towards him, but I do know someone went to the one preseason game that they had, which, by the way, is the only time Newton ever played in front of a living soul in a home game. The only time Patriots fans ever got to actually see him was that 75% capacity against Washington. And someone said they saw a little kid about 7 years old playing catch with his dad in the parking lot. He goes, "Look, Dad, I'm Cam Newton," and threw it right into the pavement.
He did not. That is the apocryphal story.
But my brother took his daughter to the game. They witnessed it firsthand. And so, look, and I feel terrible even recounting the story. It's just, what a out of the mouths of babes, what a cute little kid. But I'm sorry it did not work out well for him. And some of the stuff I just assumed he'd be able to do never materialized, like play action. The fact that he was such a running threat and that didn't turn into an advantage in the passing game. And you can say, well, he didn't have anyone to throw to. Yeah, but eight touchdowns in 14 games is unheard of in this day and age. So Mac Jones, his replacement, your thoughts on him, because we're getting towards the end here and we've hardly even addressed this team.
I think with Mac, he has exceeded everything, in the lead up when I'm not as college football inclined, going into the draft as my cohort, the Senator Phil Perry. I'm like, they already have Mac Jones. Why do they have to take him in the first round? They have Mac Jones. He's Jarrett Stidham. So if he's, I said, Mac Jones is going to be Colt McCoy. He's going to be, at best, Chad Pennington, who I loved.
Mm-hmm.
Much better player than people understand. Or Kirk Cousins. But I didn't understand the arc. I mean, the kid is a savant. He's an absolute savant. The Patriots, I believe, tried to gum him up and say, can he deal with this? And they give him more, and they give him more, and they give him more, and they give him more. And he ate all of it. And it was amazing. Brian Hoyer talked about that too, Jerry. He'd say, "Yeah, I got it." And Hoyer would go, "Yeah, okay, I guess you got it." And then he would. So over the course of time, look, he doesn't have what we would consider a good NFL arm. Downfield, fine. Velocity, when he's going to have to throw outs to the sideline, 15, 20 yards, not great. When he can wind up, as we saw him do in the final preseason game, and gets jacked and wiggles and throws it. Yeah, he can throw some hard, but generally speaking, his velocity is not great. So that's going to be an issue. I think his body type is going to be an issue. But those are two things that over the course of time, he's going to be able to fix and improve on. Everything else he's got. So to me, Jerry, the 2001 Patriots were not as talented as this team. Forget what they ended up doing, just on paper. So, Jerry, I look at this and say, if Mac Jones can basically replicate statistically what Tom Brady did, which was 18 touchdowns, 12 picks, about 2,700 yards in 14 games. He took 41 sacks that year, Jerry. It's his career high. He was sacked on 9% of his dropbacks, the worst by far. The only thing close was a 2013 team with Dobson, and he took sacks on 6%. Usually he's around 5 or 4 or 3. So Mac's going to take sacks. He's not going to throw picks. And I think they're going to win a lot of games. What do you got? Same?
Same. And I like that you said that you think that they threw a little extra at Jones. I always felt like in practice, they kind of had their thumb on the scale with him, like unpadded practices where basically, pressure is generated by the coaches saying, all right, rush this guy. I always thought like there was more people in his face than there were for the other two. And they were testing his mettle. And, you rarely saw the error repeating, which is the big thing with this team. And, he makes a mistake in a preseason game at the end of a quarter, kind of not, going for a short dump off with no timeouts left or whatever. They work on it in practice. You don't see it again. And so, yeah, I've been on Team Jones since the 3-game losing streak they had last year. And I started to realize this kid who's tearing it up at Alabama is now going to be within their grasp possibly. And I've been on Team Max since then. And the national championship game where he throws for 455 yards without really trying in the second half, I was sold. And he's just one of a lot of guys on this team that I'm new faces around here that I'm absolutely over the moon about. So just in the short time I have you left here, who else would you say like of the new faces has really stood out and who are people going to be surprised by?
Jerry, you and I are probably reading off the same cards. Matt Judon is a perfect fit. The team had 24 sacks last year, 47 in 2019. I think Judon and Uche, who will almost be a new ad because of his lack of time last year. They're going to, one of those grab ass predictions we did, I said they'll combine for 24 sacks, which would be a lot for a Patriots team. But those two guys, I think Kendrick Bourne is going to be excellent. I think Nelson Aguilar is going to be maddening.
The drops, do you think that's the issue with him?
The drops, and I just don't think he separates that well in short area. I think he can run past people. I know he can do that, but short
like 18.7 last year yards per catch led the league.
I know,
but this is not a team that tends to emphasize the home run ball.
But with that quarterback, they can, and that to me has been absurd. We saw it in preseason. Fans saw it in preseason beyond what we were seeing at training camp. The number of times he hit guys in the hands down the field. I don't think that will go away. So they could make use of him. He's just, I don't know why he drops the ball so much. I truly don't. They're not good hands.
Yeah. Some guy, my high school football coach had a term for that, pizza paddles. It was just, if you drop balls a lot, that would be your name, pizza paddles. Fortunately, like no one ever threw to me. And one last name I got to ask you about, and I'm still kicking myself because my brother put this guy on my radar the day before the draft, and I did nothing with it. Christian Barmore.
He's going to be fascinating because he might be a guy who we're revisiting a lot of those folks who said, Warren Sapp being one of the most prominent, that this kid's a disaster. I mean, he is, again, you were with me there, Jerry, some of the one-on-ones, and we're just seeing him ragdoll adult humans who are in the 300-pound class. And you're like, how can he do that? It's because he moves so fast. His lower body is so strong. But he has just, the power that you have when you're 22 years old. So when you look at that front, Jerry, and that front seven, it goes across the front, Henry Anderson, Devon Godshaw, who I really didn't have an appreciation for until I watched him. He's friggin' huge. Lawrence Guy, who was a borderline Pro Bowl player the last few years. Now you have Barmore, Uche, Judon, Hightower, Bentley, who's playing pretty well and moving more quickly, Van Noy, Dietrich Wise, who's probably their best interior pass rusher. They lost one guy who was good, Adam Butler. He was a good player.
Yep.
And they've just completely stacked it. So I think the front seven is going to be enough to actually mitigate the absence of Gilmore to a large extent.
And last question then, Gilmore's situation, do you have any more insight into that? Because it just seems like the silence has been deafening from there, and maybe he's actually hurt, and maybe it's just all contractual under the being hidden behind the PUP list. But did you see him coming back at all?
Oh, yeah. I thought he'd be back long ago. I thought that, he talked about common ground when he talked to Josina Anderson. And that was July 9th. Mike Giardi reported in late June that he was running full. I really expected that they would hammer something out. So I think this is a hold-in that's continuing. And maybe he said, okay, you know what? If I'm going to make $7 million in salary, we're going to prorate it over 11 games. How's that sound?
Okay.
So I'm going to miss the first 6, but I don't think the Patriots are going to blink on it. I really don't. You know, he wasn't great in the 11 games he played last year relative to what he performs as. And I don't think that they're going to, without him covering people and showing them what he can do at the age of 31, coming off quad surgery, I don't think they're going to say, hey, let's give you a bunch of more money, because it does matter, right, Jerry? I mean, they have written $160 million worth of guaranteed money this offseason to replenish that roster. So I think at some point, Bill and ownership will both look at it and go, we can't just keep flinging $5 million at everybody who wants it.
Yeah. And he's seeing himself as the defensive player of the year, and they're seeing that as old news. And, you know, I'll take him for 11 games as opposed to none. But the biggest takeaway from this, Tommy Curran thinks this is a playoff team.
No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt.
AFC contender?
Oh yeah. I think people are way, way, way too high on the Bills as being just having this division locked up. I think there'll be a team that nobody would want to play in January at all. And that includes Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, who the Patriots actually haven't done that badly against over the course of time.
A couple of Brian Hoyer brain sharts. Maybe they make a game out of that, and
Exactly.
Newton fumbles in the red zone at Buffalo. So yeah, I'm with you. I think contending is back in play. There's a lot of variables there, and we're going to find out soon. So Tommy, thanks. This was the first time we've done this. So obviously, I hope it's not the last time we get to talk to you again. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's great. And we got
long.
Patriots Talk podcast. We're going to have Matt Castle on Thursday. That's on TV as well. So we'll have Castle joining me and Phil Perry. Quick Slants with Kyle Van Noy on Tuesdays, and we'll have our game plan show on Wednesdays, coming down from Gillette Stadium, kind of setting the table. So pregame, postgame live. But thank you. I just wanted to plug those two if I could.
That's a pro move. That's what happens when you bring a media veteran on here. Tommy, thanks very much for joining us, and best of luck. And we'll see you down at the stadium.
Really, really appreciate you having me, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, Nick. Well, we've got that first one in the book. Great talking
Great
to Tommy
interview.
Curran. He's a terrific dude. He's been great to me. He was great to you at NBC Sports Boston. Make sure to follow him on all his socials and watch Quick Slants and listen to his podcast. And we didn't get much into the Dolphins game. It's always a little hard looking ahead to a team that you really haven't seen. Like Belichick is always fond of saying, every year is different and every team is different. But obviously some rivals, right off the bat from Belichick and Brian Flores. Kyle Van Noy hopefully holding a grudge. Nick Saban's last two Alabama quarterbacks going at it. And the Dolphins have always, even at their worst, have always been just a trap for the Patriots. They've a trap that they have stepped into repeatedly. Belichick, anytime there's an opponent that people say, well, they're not going to be that good, Bill, right? He always goes back to
Dolphins.
Yes, the year that they were like 1-11, and the Pats on a roll, and went down there and got their asses handed to them. I think Brady threw like 4 interceptions or something. You've got the Tony Sparano game where he hit them with the Wildcat, and I was at the last regular season game 2019. I don't go to a ton of games, but I was at the one where the Pats just needed to hold on, and they got a bye week in the playoffs, and they gave up this excruciating death by 1,000 cuts drive to Ryan Fitzpatrick at the end.
Fitzmagic.
Yes, exactly. To cost them the bye week. So have you looked ahead at the Dolphins at all? You any thoughts about them and how they're shaping up? Because I have not seen them in preseason. I'll be honest with you.
So the Dolphins, I didn't watch many preseasons. I watched one preseason game, but I don't know how confident they are with Tua Tagovailoa starting in their quarterback slot, because there was talk that they were on the trade block. They were willing to negotiate for Deshaun Watson, and that scared a lot of Dolphins fans. I mean, you just get Tua. Yeah, he doesn't have a great season, and he goes in and out between Ryan Fitzpatrick and sitting and not playing and then playing again. But it's like, do you think it's time to just fully entrust in Tua? I don't know. I don't think Miami does trust Tua 100%. I think we got the better of the Alabama quarterbacks. And I know a lot of people say the same thing. There was people that claimed Mac Jones should have started over Tua. And Tua was just not a publicity stunt, but he was just a media name in for Alabama. And Mac Jones was sitting there not playing because of that. And he was a very sufficient quarterback.
Right. Yeah. And I can see the logic behind when you've got the luxury of doing this, to let a quarterback develop on the bench for a little bit. The perfect example is Mahomes sitting behind Alex Smith for a year, but Mahomes was the 20th pick or whatever, and Smith was a former first round. When you take a guy in like the top 7, I want to say Tua was, and by the second year, he's not entrenched as your absolute franchise quarterback. If you're even talking trade, that sends off all sorts of air raid sirens. So like that is danger on about to happen. So I don't know. Listen, maybe he's gonna just become the next Russell Wilson.
He could.
Who can say? But I like the Patriots defense's chances against him a lot more than if I'm a Dolphins fan. I like
100%.
Flores' defense against Mac Jones and this totally retooled offense.
Well, I was going to say, I think the Dolphins took a step back on the defensive side, not just losing Kyle Van Noy. I think they took a lot of loss in free agency. They didn't pay many people. And they didn't go, I don't think they really were out there shopping. I think they focused on the draft.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly they didn't add parts the way the Pats did. In fact, they had to, jettison payroll on Kyle Van Noy, like we mentioned, who's, exactly the kind of guy that they brought in to build around and to, take a refurbishing team and kind of lead it and show it the way. And whatever went on there that they don't like him, I think is going to bite them in the ass starting on Sunday. So, much looking forward to that as you are. Appreciate you, Nick, the work you did. Looking forward to us doing this every week. Thanks once again to Tommy Curran. We're going to be back next Wednesday, and we'll be fully up and operational on all the social media. We'll give you all those handles again. But this has been episode 1 of Do Your Pod Slancha.